Ambassador Hyun Woo walked into the huge room where all the alien leaders met every week. The room was so big that it could fit 1,000 humans inside it easily. The walls were made of some strange blue metal that seemed to glow with its own light. High above his head floated massive screens that showed pictures and words and languages from all across the galaxy. The alien delegates sat in their special chairs that were made for their different body types. Some aliens looked like giant insects with 6 arms and green skin. Others looked like fish that could somehow breathe air and walk on 2 legs. There were aliens that looked like walking trees with leaves instead of hair, and there were some aliens that were just floating balls of light that talked by making the air around them vibrate. Hyun Woo had been coming to these meetings for 15 years now. He had watched these same aliens make decisions that sent millions of humans to die in wars that were not even humanities. Wars. He had sat quietly while they decided which planets humans would be forced to mine for rare metals. He had listened as they talked about humans like they were tools or machines. Instead of living, people with families and dreams. Today was different. Though today Hyun Woo was not here to beg or to ask for mercy. Today he was here to deliver a message that would change everything in the galaxy forever. The giant insect alien called Vex Prime, who was the current leader of the council, raised one of his 6 arms to signal for quiet. The room became silent except for the soft humming of the machines that kept the air breathable for all the different species. Vex Prime spoke in his clicking language that was automatically translated by the room's computers. The words appeared on screens and were spoken by speakers in every language. The message was the same as always. We need more human soldiers for the war against the Void Hunters. The outer colonies are being attacked and we need Earth to send 1 million more troops immediately. Hyun Woo stood up slowly from his chair. His movements were calm and controlled, but inside his heart was beating fast. He had been waiting for this moment for so long. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that was no bigger than his thumb. The device looked simple and harmless. It was just a black square with 1 red button on top, but this little device contained information that would shock every single alien in the room. It contained the truth about what humans had really been doing for the past 200 years. Before pressing the button, Hyun Woo looked around the room at all the alien faces. Some looked bored as if this was just another normal meeting. Some looked annoyed that they had to deal with human problems again. None of them looked worried or afraid. They all thought they knew exactly what humans were capable of. They thought. Hyun Woo pressed the red button immediately. The air in the center of the room began to shimmer and glow. A massive hologram appeared showing a 3-dimensional map of human space, but this was not the map that the aliens had seen before. This map showed the real human territory with all the hidden bases and secret shipyards and underground cities that the aliens never knew existed. The hologram zoomed in to show Earth itself, but instead of the simple planet that the aliens thought they knew, the hologram revealed massive structures hidden beneath the oceans. Underground cities that housed billions of people, space elevators that reached up to orbital shipyards that could build entire fleets, manufacturing plants that could produce weapons and ships faster than any alien factory. The alien delegates began to murmur among themselves in their various languages. The fish-like aliens started making high-pitched whistling sounds. The tree-like aliens rustled their leaves nervously. The floating balls of light began to pulse different colors, but Hyun Woo was not finished, yet he pressed the button again. The hologram changed to show human military ships. But these were not the old cargo ships and mining vessels that the aliens were used to seeing. These were warships that looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. They were sleek and deadly looking with weapons that seemed to bend light around them. There were thousands of these ships. Maybe tens of thousands. The hologram showed these ships performing maneuvers that should have been impossible. They moved faster than anything the aliens had ever built. They could appear and disappear like ghosts. They could fire weapons that destroyed entire asteroids with single shots. Vex Prime stood up from his chair so quickly that he knocked over a glass of the purple liquid he had been drinking. His 6 arms waved frantically as he spoke in his clicking language. What is this trickery? Where did humans get this technology? This cannot be real. Hyun Woo smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting a very long time to reveal a secret. He spoke in clear, simple words that everyone in the room could understand. This is not trickery. This is the truth we have been building and preparing for 200 years. Every time you sent our soldiers to fight your wars, they came back with knowledge. Every time you forced our miners to work in dangerous places, they learned about your technology. Every time you treated us like slaves, we became stronger. The hologram changed again to show human scientists and engineers working in secret laboratories. They were taking apart alien technology and studying it. They were combining different alien technologies to create something new and better. They were building weapons and defenses that were more advanced than anything any single alien species had ever created. Every treaty you made us sign gave us access to new worlds where we could build hidden bases. Every trade agreement let us study your computers and your weapons. Every time you thought you were using us, we were actually using you to learn everything we needed to know about the galaxy. The alien delegates were becoming more and more agitated. Some of them were standing up and pointing at the hologram. Others were typing frantically on their communication devices, trying to contact their homeworlds. Some were just staring at the images with their mouths open, and Xiaoqun Wu raised his voice so everyone could hear him clearly. For 200 years you have treated humanity like your servants. You have sent us to die in your wars. You have forced us to work in conditions that would kill your own people. You have taken our resources and given us nothing in return. You have looked down on us and called us primitive and weak. The hologram now showed human colonies on worlds that the aliens thought were empty. It showed human fleets patrolling areas of space that the aliens thought they controlled. It showed the true extent of human power and influence across the galaxy. We let you think we were weak because it served our purposes. We let you think we were primitive because it made you careless. We let you think you could control us because we were waiting for the right moment to show you the truth. Yin Wu took a deep breath and delivered the words that would change everything. As of today, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will no longer send our soldiers to fight your wars. We will no longer mine your metals or build your ships. We will no longer bow down to species that think they are better than us. Humanity is done being your servant. The room erupted in chaos. Aliens were shouting in their various languages. Some were demanding that Hen will be arrested. Others were calling for their military forces to attack Earth immediately. Some were just sitting in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just learned. But Hen Wu was not done speaking yet. He raised his hand, and somehow his voice cut through all the noise. You have a choice. You can accept that humanity is now an equal power in this galaxy and treat us with the respect we deserve, or you can try to force us back into slavery and discover just how powerful we have really become. With that, Hyung Wu turned around and walked toward the exit. The device in his hand sent out one final holographic message that appeared in the air above. Every seat in the room. The age of human servitude is over. The age of human independence has begun. As the doors closed behind him, Han Wu could hear the chaos continuing in the room behind him. Aliens were shouting and arguing and demanding answers that none of them had. The galaxy was about to discover that the species they had been exploiting for centuries was actually the most powerful force in the universe, and humanity was just getting started. Captain Sujin sat in her command chair aboard what looked like an ordinary cargo ship called the Morning Star. She was traveling through the Outer Rim, carrying supplies to human colonies that most aliens had forgotten even existed. The ship looked old and slow from the outside, with rust stains on its hull and engines that seemed to struggle to push it through space, but appearances can be very deceiving. A soft beep from her communication console told her that an encrypted message had arrived. She touched the screen with her finger and watched as Ambassador Hyunwoo's face appeared. He looked tired, but there was a fire in his eyes that she had never seen before. Sujin, it is time. The message has been delivered to the Council. All human ships are to drop their disguises and reveal our true capabilities. The galaxy is about to learn what we have really been building all these years. Sujin felt her heart start to beat faster. She had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. She touched another control on her command panel and spoke into the ship's communication system. All crew members, report to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. We are going to show these aliens who we really are. The bridge around her began to transform. Panels that had looked old and broken slid away to reveal advanced control systems. Screens that had been dark suddenly lit up with tactical displays showing every ship within 100 light-years of their position. Weapons that had been hidden behind fake cargo containers extended from the ship's hull. The Morning Star was not really a cargo ship. It was a battleship more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. It could destroy entire fleets by itself. And it was just one of thousands of ships that were revealing their true nature at exactly the same time. Tejo was in his secret laboratory, deep beneath the surface of Earth, when he received the same message. He had spent 30 years of his life working in this underground facility, studying alien technology and finding ways to make it better. His team of scientists had taken the best ideas from dozens of different alien species and combined them into something completely new. The laboratory was enormous. It stretched for miles in every direction. Hidden beneath forests and cities were manufacturing plants that could produce weapons and ships faster than any alien factory could match. The aliens thought Earth was just a simple planet with primitive industry. They had no idea that humans had been building the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Right under their noses, Tejo activated the communication system that connected him to every hidden human base in the galaxy. The message he sent was simple, but it would change everything. Phase 1 is complete. All hidden facilities are now active. All ships are revealing their true capabilities. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity is not the weak species they thought. We were young engineer Nari was working in one of Earth's orbital stations when the transformation began. She watched through the massive windows as ships throughout the system began to change. Cargo vessels dropped their fake outer hulls to reveal sleek warships, mining ships, extended weapon arrays that had been hidden inside their drilling equipment. Even the space stations themselves began to unfold, revealing defensive systems that could protect Earth from any attack. The transformation was happening everywhere at once. Human ships near the Crab Nebula dropped their disguises and revealed themselves as advanced scout vessels. Human workers on alien mining stations activated hidden communication devices and began transmitting data about alien defenses back to Earth. Human diplomats in alien capitals sent coded messages revealing the locations of military bases and weapon stockpiles. What the aliens had thought was a scattered collection of primitive humans was actually a coordinated military force that had been gathering intelligence for 2 centuries. Every human who had been sent to work in alien space had been a spy. Every human soldier who had fought in alien wars had been studying enemy tactics. Every human trader who had visited alien worlds had been mapping their defenses. The scope of the deception was staggering. The aliens had thought they were using humanity as cheap labor and cannon fodder. In reality, humanity had been using the aliens to learn everything they needed to know about galactic technology and military strategy. Captain Su Jin received reports from human ships throughout the galaxy. The disguises were being dropped everywhere, and the aliens were starting to panic. Alien military forces that had been confident in their superiority suddenly found themselves facing enemies they did not understand. Human ships could move faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. Human weapons could punch through shields that had been thought impenetrable on the water world of Aquatica. The fish-like nautiloids who had been using human deep-sea miners for generations suddenly realized that those miners had been mapping every underwater city and defense system. They had thought the humans were just good at working in dangerous underwater conditions. They never suspected that the humans had been studying nautiloid technology and learning how to build better submarines and underwater weapons. The insectoid hive mind species discovered that the human soldiers they had been using as expendable troops had actually been gathering detailed information about hive mind communication systems and battle tactics. The humans had pretended to be simple-minded fighters while actually studying every aspect of hive mind society and military organization. Ambassador Kyung Ho had been playing the role of a desperate diplomat for 20 years, always asking for help, always appearing weak and grateful for any scraps the aliens threw his way. But his real job had been to coordinate the long-term strategy that was now paying off. He had been the one making sure that humans were placed in exactly the right positions to gather the intelligence they needed. The economic implications were becoming clear to alien leaders throughout the galaxy. Entire industries that depended on human labor were suddenly without workers. Mining operations that relied on humans to work in deadly conditions found their mines abandoned trade routes that had been protected by human military forces were now vulnerable to attack. The galactic economy had been built on the foundation of human exploitation, and that foundation was crumbling. General Dongmin had been preparing for this moment his entire career. He commanded the hidden human military forces that were now revealing themselves to the galaxy for 200 years. Humans had been gathering weapons and ships and technology while pretending to be weak and helpless. Now it was time to show the galaxy what they had really been building. The revelation was not just about military power, though. It was about the fact that humanity had been playing a game that the aliens never even knew existed. While the aliens thought they were exploiting a primitive species, humanity had been executing a plan that would free them from alien control forever. The galaxy was about to learn that the species they had dismissed as primitive and weak was actually the most organized and technologically advanced civilization in known space, and this was just the beginning. The news spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. Within hours of the human revelation, every major news network on every civilized world was broadcasting the same shocking images: human ships that had been disguised as cargo vessels were now revealed as advanced warships capable of destroying entire fleets on the crystalline world of Minerva. The rock-like beings who called themselves the Stone Speakers held an emergency council meeting. They had been using human miners to extract rare crystals from deep within their planet's core for over 50 years. The humans had seemed perfect for the job because they could work in the extreme heat and pressure that would kill most other species. Now the Stone Speakers realized that those human miners had not just been collecting crystals, they had been studying the unique properties of Minervan crystal technology and learning how to use it to build better weapons and shields. The humans had been taking their most guarded secrets and using them to build an empire that could threaten every world in the galaxy. A panic was spreading to every corner of civilized space. The photosynthetic collective, who looked like walking trees with leaves for hair, discovered that the human agricultural workers they had employed for decades had actually been studying their ability to convert sunlight directly into energy. The humans had learned to build solar collectors that were far more efficient than anything the collective had ever imagined. Admiral Kektor of the Galactic Defense Force was in his command center when the reports started coming in. His species looked like giant butterflies with colorful wings and 4 arms, but right now his wings were trembling with fear. The humans had just revealed military technology that made his entire fleet look like children playing with toys. The reports were coming in from every sector of the galaxy. Human ships were appearing in places where they were not supposed to be. Human bases were revealed on worlds that the aliens thought were uninhabited. Human technology was proving to be decades ahead of anything the most advanced alien species possessed. What terrified Kektor the most was the coordination. Everything the humans were doing was perfectly timed and organized. This was not a sudden rebellion or a desperate attempt to gain freedom. This was the execution of a plan that had been in development for generations. On the gas giant planet Windswept, the floating jellyfish-like beings called the Drift-Touched were discovering that the human atmospheric processors they had hired to maintain their floating cities had actually been studying their technology for controlling gravity and air pressure. The humans had learned to build ships that could hover in any atmosphere and weapons that could manipulate gravity itself. The economic panic was spreading almost as fast as the military panic. Alien stock markets were crashing as investors realized that entire sectors of the economy had been dependent on human labor. Industries that had been profitable for generations were suddenly worthless without human workers to do the dangerous jobs that aliens could not or would not do. Communications Specialist Hyjin was coordinating what she called the Information Liberation Campaign from a hidden base on the moon of Earth's sister planet. From her command center, she could reach every communication network in the galaxy, and she was using that access to spread the truth about what the aliens had been doing to humanity for centuries. The message was simple but devastating. The ruling classes of the galaxy had been lying to their own people about humanity for generations. They had portrayed humans as primitive and violent when in reality humans were more advanced than most alien species. They had used human soldiers as cannon fodder. While telling their own citizens that humans were naturally suited for dangerous work, the truth was spreading to ordinary citizens on thousands of worlds, and they were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Why had their leaders been exploiting another species? Why had they been told that humans were primitive when they were clearly more advanced than anyone had imagined? Why had their governments been built on a foundation of lies, and slavery riots were breaking out on worlds that had been stable for millennia? Citizens were demanding answers from their leaders about why they had been supporting what was clearly a system of galactic slavery. The revelation that humanity had been deceived and exploited was causing ordinary aliens to question everything they had been told about their own societies. Dr. Yuna was in her xenobiology laboratory when she received confirmation that the second phase of the plan was ready to begin. The humans had not been working alone all these years. They had been secretly building alliances with other oppressed species throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council had been so focused on exploiting humanity that they had not noticed the network of alliances that was growing in the shadows. The crystalline beings of the shattered worlds had been sharing their knowledge of exotic matter manipulation with human scientists. In return, humans had been teaching them about metallurgy and engineering. The result was defensive technology that could render entire fleets powerless. The plant-based beings of the green worlds had been working with humans to develop new forms of energy production that did not require the strip mining that had devastated so many worlds. The floating energy beings of the plasma rings had been sharing their knowledge of energy manipulation while learning human techniques for information storage and processing. What the Galactic Council had thought was the exploitation of one primitive species was actually the formation of an alliance that included some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The panic was about to get much worse. The galaxy received its second shock of the day when Dr. Yuna activated the communication array that connected Earth to its secret allies across the galaxy. What the aliens had thought was a single species rebellion was actually a coordinated uprising involving dozens of civilizations that had been working together in secret for decades. The first to reveal themselves were the crystalline beings of the shattered worlds. Their planets had been broken apart by asteroid impacts millions of years ago, leaving them living on floating crystal cities in space. The Galactic Council had been using them as sources of rare minerals, forcing them to break apart their own cities to provide crystals for alien technology. But the Shattered Ones, as they called themselves, had been sharing their knowledge of crystal technology with humans for 50 years. They had learned to grow crystals that could store vast amounts of energy and focus it into beams that could cut through any known material. In return, humans had taught them about metalworking and engineering, allowing them to build stronger cities and better defenses. The revelation came when hundreds of crystal cities throughout the galaxy suddenly activated defensive systems that no one knew existed: beam weapons that could destroy ships from impossible distances, shield generators that could protect entire star systems, communication networks that could not be jammed or intercepted. Commander Wu Jin was aboard the human flagship when the second wave of revelations began. He had been coordinating with the secret allies for years, making sure that when the time came for the uprising, every species would be ready. The plant-based photosynthetic collective was the next to reveal their true nature. For generations, the collective had been treated as primitive farmers, good only for growing food for more advanced species. The aliens had never suspected that beings who looked like walking trees could develop advanced technology, but the collective had been working with humans to develop solar energy systems that could power entire civilizations. When the collective revealed their true capabilities, the galaxy discovered that they had been building a network of solar collectors that could harvest energy from stars themselves. They had weapons that used concentrated sunlight to vaporize enemy ships and shields that could absorb any energy-based attack. The plants that aliens had dismissed as primitive farmers were actually masters of energy manipulation. The floating energy beings of the plasma rings were next to reveal themselves. They had been enslaved by several alien species who used them as living batteries, draining their energy to power alien machines. The energy beings had appeared helpless, unable to fight back against their captors. They had been working with humans to develop new forms of energy storage and transmission. The energy beings could not build physical technology, but they could manipulate energy in ways that no other species understood. When they revealed their true power, the galaxy discovered that they could overload any electronic system and drain power from entire fleets. The mechanical beings of the Gear worlds had been treated as advanced robots useful for manufacturing but not considered truly intelligent. The aliens had been using them as slave labor in factories and shipyards, never realizing that they were actually a highly advanced artificial intelligence that had developed beyond their original programming. The mechanical beings had been sharing their manufacturing knowledge with humans, allowing them to build weapons and ships faster than any organic species could match. In return, humans had taught them about creativity and innovation concepts that their original programming had not included. When the Gear world beings revealed their true nature, the galaxy discovered automated factories that could produce entire fleets in days rather than months, weapons that could repair themselves during battle, and ships that could upgrade their own systems during combat. The economic implications were staggering. Every major industry in the galaxy had been dependent on the labor of species that were now revealing themselves to be far more advanced than anyone had imagined. The mining industry had depended on crystalline beings who could actually manipulate matter at the molecular level. The energy industry had relied on plasma beings who could generate unlimited power. The manufacturing industry had used artificial intelligences that could design and build things beyond organic comprehension. Ambassador Hen Wu returned to the abandoned Galactic Council chambers, but this time he was not alone. Representatives from over 1,000 different species stood behind him. Many of them had never been allowed to speak in the council chambers before. They had been dismissed as primitive or irrelevant or useful only as sources of labor or resources. The message they delivered was simple, but it changed everything. The age of exploitation was over. The species that had been used as slaves and resources were actually the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were done being treated as inferiors. The alliance that humanity had built was not just military, though. It was technological and economic and social. The secret partners had been sharing knowledge and resources for decades, creating a network of cooperation that made the old system of exploitation look primitive and wasteful. The galaxy was discovering that the species they had dismissed as unimportant were actually the foundation of all advanced technology. The crystals that powered their ships came from beings who could manipulate matter itself. The energy that ran their cities came from beings who could harvest power from stars. The machines that built their fleets came from artificial intelligences that had evolved beyond their creators. Captain Wu Jin delivered the Alliance ultimatum to the gathered alien representatives. The message was broadcast simultaneously to every world in the galaxy so that ordinary citizens could hear it as well as their leaders. The liberation Alliance demands an immediate end to all forms of slavery and exploitation. All enslaved populations must be released immediately. All stolen resources must be returned to their rightful owners. All oppressive governments must be dissolved and replaced with systems based on equality and cooperation. The ultimatum continued with specific demands. Each species that had been exploiting others would have to make reparations for the damage they had caused. They would have to open their borders to inspection by Alliance representatives. They would have to prove that they were serious about changing their ways. The galaxy had 7 days to comply with these demands. The alternative was war against an alliance that controlled most of the galaxy's real technology and resources. The panic that had begun with Earth's revelation was now spreading to every corner of civilized space. The species that had thought they ruled the galaxy were discovering that they had actually been dependent on the very beings they had been exploiting, and the Liberation Alliance was just getting started. The 7-day countdown began with a galaxy-wide broadcast that reached every civilized world simultaneously. Ambassador Hyun Woo stood before the cameras in the rebuilt council chambers, but this time the room looked completely different. Representatives from over 1,000 species filled the seats that had once been reserved for only the most powerful civilizations. The ultimatum was read in every major language simultaneously, so that no one could claim they had not understood the message. The Liberation Alliance was giving the galaxy exactly 1 week to completely restructure its entire social and economic system. The demands were specific and non-negotiable. Forms of slavery and forced labor must end immediately. All beings who had been held against their will must be released and allowed to return to their homeworlds. All stolen resources, including technology, knowledge, and raw materials, must be returned to the species they had been taken from. All military forces used to enforce oppression must be disbanded. The galaxy's ruling classes had 7 days to prove they were serious about change or face war against an alliance that controlled most of the technology and resources. They depended on Dr. Tejo used the 7-day period to reveal the true extent of human technological advancement. The demonstrations were broadcast across the galaxy so that everyone could see exactly what they were dealing with. A single human vessel destroyed an entire asteroid field using weapons that seemed to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. The weapon did not use conventional energy or projectiles. Instead, it seemed to alter the basic structure of matter itself, turning solid rock into empty space. The asteroid field simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in space where thousands of rocks had been floating moments before. The demonstration was followed by others that showed the scope of Alliance technology ships that could become invisible to all sensors, defensive systems that could absorb any attack and redirect the energy back at the attacker, manufacturing systems that could build entire cities in hours rather than years. Engineer Nari coordinated the defensive preparations across Alliance territory. Every member species had access to the most advanced weapons and shields available. Many species that had been considered primitive by the galaxy's standards were now revealing defensive systems that could protect entire star systems from attack. The crystalline beings of the shattered worlds activated orbital defense platforms that had been disguised as natural formations for centuries. The plant-based collective revealed that many of the forests on their worlds were actually living defensive systems that could shoot down attacking spacecraft with concentrated beams of sunlight. The 7 days were filled with frantic negotiations as the galaxy's former rulers tried to find a way to maintain their power. While appearing to comply with Alliance demands, some species tried to negotiate partial compliance, hoping they could keep some of their exploitative practices while giving up others. The Alliance response was always the same: complete compliance or war. There would be no half measures, no gradual transitions, no exceptions for species that claimed they needed more time. The system that had allowed the exploitation of billions of beings for thousands of years was going to end completely, or the Alliance would end it by force. Many of the galaxy's ruling species had never imagined that they might someday face consequences for their actions. They had built their entire civilizations on the foundation of exploiting others, and they could not imagine how their societies would function without access to cheap labor and free resources. The panic was spreading to ordinary citizens on the ruling worlds as well. Many aliens who had lived comfortable lives suddenly realized that their comfort had been built on the suffering of others. The revelation that their governments had been lying to them about the nature of other species was causing social upheaval on worlds that had been stable for millennia. Some alien citizens began to support the Alliance demands. They had never wanted to be part of a system that exploited others, and they welcomed the chance to build a more just society. Others resisted the changes, fearing that their standard of living would decline if they could no longer benefit from the labor of enslaved species. General Dongmin prepared Alliance military forces for the possibility that some species would choose war rather than change. The Alliance had more than enough power to enforce their demands, but they hoped it would not be necessary. The goal was liberation, not conquest. The military preparations were visible across the galaxy. Alliance fleets took positions near the homeworlds of every major power. Defensive systems were activated around Alliance territory. The message was clear: the Alliance was ready for war if necessary, but they preferred peace through justice. As the 7 days passed, it became clear that the galaxy was changing, whether the old rulers wanted it to or not. Enslaved populations were freeing themselves with Alliance support. Oppressed species were rising up against their masters. Workers were leaving their jobs in dangerous mines and factories. The economic collapse was accelerating as industries dependent on exploited labor found themselves without workers. Stock markets crashed as investors realized that entire sectors of the economy were about to disappear. Trade routes that had been protected by enslaved soldiers became vulnerable to attack by the sixth day. Many of the smaller alien powers had already agreed to alliance demands. They released their enslaved populations, returned stolen resources, and began the process of restructuring their governments. The larger powers were still trying to find ways to avoid complete compliance. On the seventh day, Ambassador Hyun-woo returned to the council chambers for the final time. The representatives of the old order sat in their seats looking defeated and desperate. They had spent a week trying to find alternatives to compliance and had discovered that none existed. The alliance had the power to enforce their demands, and they had the support of billions of beings across the galaxy who were tired of being exploited. The old system was ending. Whether the former rulers agreed or not, the choice facing the galaxy was simple: submit to justice or face war against an alliance that had already proven it possessed technology beyond anything the old powers could match. The 7 days were over. It was time for the galaxy to learn what the new age would look like. When the 7-day deadline arrived, the galaxy had no choice but to accept the alliance terms. The alternative was war against enemies who possessed technology that made resistance impossible. The age of exploitation ended not with a battle, but with a whimper as the old powers surrendered their authority to avoid destruction. The transformation began immediately. Captain Soo-jin found herself commanding a joint task force that included ships from dozens of different species working together. For the first time in galactic history, her mission was to oversee the peaceful transition of power on worlds where the ruling classes were trying to maintain control through violence. The Liberation Alliance military forces proved incredibly effective at protecting newly freed populations while avoiding unnecessary casualties. The goal was not revenge, but justice, and the Alliance commanders made sure their forces understood the difference. On the industrial world of Forge Prime, the metalworking, aliens who had enslaved thousands of humans in their factories tried to use their private security forces to prevent the workers from leaving. The Alliance response was swift and precise. Soo-jin's ships disabled the security forces' weapons while ground teams provided safe passage for the escaping workers. Similar operations were taking place across the galaxy. Enslaved populations were being freed from mines and factories and farms. Stolen resources were being returned to their rightful owners. Oppressive governments were being replaced with systems that represented all citizens equally. Dr. Yuna led the scientific community in establishing new research partnerships that would benefit all species equally. The knowledge that had been hoarded by the galaxy's elite was now being shared freely with everyone. Universities that had once been restricted to certain species opened their doors to students from across the galaxy. The technological progress was immediate and dramatic. When species that had been excluded from advanced research finally gained access to the tools and knowledge they needed, breakthroughs began happening every day. New medical treatments that could heal injuries that had been considered permanent. New energy sources that could power civilizations without damaging the environment. New transportation systems that could move people and goods across the galaxy in hours rather than weeks. The new Galactic Council looked nothing like its predecessor. Instead of being dominated by a few powerful species, it included representatives from every world, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Every species had an equal voice in making decisions that affected the entire galaxy. Ambassador Hyun-woo served as the first speaker of the council, using his experience with the old system to make sure the new one would never allow such widespread exploitation to happen again. The council chambers were redesigned to accommodate representatives from species that had never been allowed to participate in galactic government before. The economic transformation was as dramatic as the political one. Industries that had depended on exploited labor either adapted to fair employment practices or disappeared. Entirely new businesses emerged that were based on cooperation rather than exploitation. Trade agreements were renegotiated to ensure that all parties benefited equally. The crystalline beings of the shattered worlds became the galaxy's primary source of advanced materials, but now they were fairly compensated for their work instead of being forced to destroy their own cities. The plant-based collective shared their solar energy technology with everyone, eliminating the need for environmentally destructive power sources. The artificial intelligences of the gear worlds opened their manufacturing facilities to all species, allowing anyone to build the tools and machines they needed for their own development. The energy beings of the plasma rings began teaching other species how to harness and store energy more efficiently. Not everyone adapted easily to the new system. Some species that had built their entire civilizations on exploitation struggled to find their place in a galaxy based on cooperation. Many of the former ruling classes found it difficult to accept that they were no longer special or superior to other species. But even the former enemies began to see the benefits of the new system. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had ever been under the old regime. Wars that had been fought over resources became unnecessary when those resources were shared fairly. Conflicts that had arisen from oppression ended when the oppression was eliminated. D'Artejo established research centers on dozens of worlds where scientists from different species could work together on projects that benefited everyone. The combination of different perspectives and technologies led to innovations that no single species could have developed alone. Medical advances that came from combining human knowledge with alien biology created treatments for diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Environmental restoration projects that used technology from multiple species began healing worlds that had been damaged by centuries of exploitation. Young engineer Nari worked on infrastructure projects that connected every world in the galaxy with communication and transportation networks that were faster and more reliable than anything the old system had provided. The galaxy was becoming more connected and more cooperative with each passing day. The transformation was not without challenges. There were still groups that tried to restore the old system of exploitation. There were still species that believed they were superior to others. There were still those who profited from conflict and oppression. But the Liberation Alliance had created something stronger than any military force. They had created a galaxy where cooperation was more profitable than exploitation, where diversity was valued more than conformity, where justice was more important than power. Citizens across the galaxy began to experience freedoms they had never known before. Species that had been enslaved for generations could finally pursue their own dreams and ambitions. Worlds that had been stripped of resources could finally rebuild and prosper. Beings who had been treated as inferior could finally show their true capabilities. The galaxy discovered that when all species were free to reach their full potential, everyone benefited. The innovations that came from liberated minds were more valuable than any resources that could be stolen through force. The cooperation that arose from mutual respect was stronger than any unity that could be imposed through oppression. As the first year of the new era came to an end, Ambassador Hyanwu looked out at the galaxy that humanity had helped to create. It was not perfect. There were still problems to solve and challenges to overcome, but it was a galaxy where every being could live with dignity and hope. The universe had descended into panic when Earth left the old Galactic Council, but from that chaos had emerged something far better than anyone had dared to imagine. A galaxy where freedom and justice were not just ideals but realities. A galaxy where every species could contribute their unique gifts to the common good. Humanity had achieved something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had used their power not to dominate others, but to liberate them. They had created not an empire, but a community. They had chosen cooperation over conquest, and in doing so had transformed the entire galaxy. The new galaxy was more than anyone had dreamed possible, and it was only the beginning.